Well, welcome to the green room today, and today might look a little bit different. We're actually sitting here at a table, kind of switching positions a little bit. But I have Pastor Wayne Drain with us today, who ministered yesterday at Zion City, and just can I add, just did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Always such substance and such a profound word. People were just deeply, I think, impacted by it, and I'm not sure what the final number is, but there's literally, I think, safe to say 170 plus that received Christ yesterday, that accepted Jesus, and so that in and of itself is always a reason to celebrate. And so wanted to just jump into this kind of conversation. Many times we have questions, an opportunity for people to interact with the message, and so yesterday's message, the Mountain of the Lord. I have heard the Seven Mountains teaching. And I think you did a really great job of helping to explain the origins of it. You know, Francis Schaeffer. I've heard most of it probably through Bill Bright. I think I think maybe he, at least for me, was the predominant voice. And it's interesting because it seems like there's so much I would say controversy, but do you have any insight into what creates this craziness that's out there around the Seven Mountains? And because it seems pretty practical to me. I mean, I look at it and go, well, yeah, you could see those spheres of influence and the church going into it.
I think in the context of being involved with the church as an individual, and then you need to impact your world for the glory of Jesus. That's what we're here. That's why we're here. But the problem is that everyone is so frantically wanting to be an influencer.
Right. Sure.
And so they get involved in their mountain of influence.
Right.
And they start thinking that's all there is.
Yeah.
And so before you know it, they're spending all their time, all the margins in their life in that one mountain.
Right. Right.
And they don't come back to the mountain of the Lord.
Right.
They don't keep coming back and being with God's people and being in His presence and saying, Lord, here's what I'm doing in my mountain of influence. Is that still what you want me to do?
I love that.
So the whole thing, the whole call for me is don't lose perspective of the big picture, that we're here to serve God.
Yeah.
We're not here to just be influencers. We're not here to just rally in one mountain of influence.
Right.
We want to do that, and we want to do it well.
Right.
But we want to make sure it's the Lord that's sending us, the Lord that can say, hey, we don't want to do that anymore. We want you to do this.
Yeah.
Because people tend to find their identity in what they do.
Yeah, it's true.
And our identity is in the Lord.
Right.
So so my whole thing about the eighth mountain
Yeah.
is to make sure it stays supreme.
Yeah.
It stays the place where you go and where you listen and where it's revealed to you what you should do, what you should change, what you should adjust. And so that's the idea for me about the eighth mountain.
I think that's so key, that when you talk about going to the mountain of the Lord and receiving the assignment, which I love that, the real sort of, vision statement for Zion City is to encounter God, which I would say is on the, on the mountain of the Lord.
That's it.
And transform culture. And I think that, that seems so, there's always this part of me that when I say that, I'm like, man, that seems so huge. But then when you really boil it down to, I love what you said yesterday, where my influence, talking about yourself, families, the church, your own family, and I thought if we could see it that way, in that perspective, and see it as an assignment, I really walked away from that moment going, okay, Lord, I realized probably just where I'm at, my being sent into the church world,
right.
And obviously the family, but I thought it made me just come back and go, Lord. So I think it's so important people understand it is an assignment. It's just not you go out and pick the mountain you think is most attractive, though you might find it attractive, but it's not like, well, I want to be an influencer, because I think that gets us tripped up, especially, in seasons like this where we're heading into an election year. Everybody wants to go to the mountain of government, and we need to vote biblically, all those things, but it's like suddenly everybody feels like, do you feel like there are different seasons where different mountains are emphasized or playing a bigger portion in our culture and society overall?
Yes, I think it keeps circling around and coming back to what's important. Like right now, among the Gen Zers, one of their values is to get sleep at night.
Right. Huh. Well, that's my value too, actually.
So they're in society, there is a reaction to all the frantic busyness.
Yes.
And some people are drawing back and going, no, what's healthy for me, and
Wow.
what's about my family? And so people start emphasizing different things. Like for me, when I started, I was in arts and entertainment.
Right.
I was doing concerts and all that. Then we started having children. It's about family,
Right.
and starting the church out of our home.
Sure.
It's all about the church. And there are folks that tried to get me to go into government. I even had a prophetic word that I was going to be the mayor of Russellville, and I said, "Yeah, right." and so
Right.
they
Well, there's still time.
there's still time.
There's still time.
But I did seek the Lord about that,
Sure.
and I thought, no, that's not me. That's not my assignment.
Right.
And I've got some friends that are in government and politics, and I'm so thankful for them. But that's not my assignment.
Yeah.
And what's helpful for me is everyone feels like they got to say yes to everything.
Yeah, it's so good.
But if you don't have a no, after a while, your yes doesn't mean anything.
Right. Well, I tell people all the time, every time I say no, I'm actually saying yes to something else.
Yeah.
When I say yes to something, I'm saying no to something else.
Yeah.
And so for folks who really struggle with saying no, maybe out of people pleasing or just a feeling of commitment or guilt or whatever it might be, you're always saying no. You're always saying yes. It's just, are we saying yes to the right things as it relates to the assignment, I think, that the Lord has given us. And so, but as we talk about this, the mountain of the Lord concept and everything else bowing to that, and inside of that, obviously there's the mountain of religion, which, encompasses the church on some level. But there's this sort of interplay. I guess what I'm getting at is I feel like the church, obviously we've seen some 46 million people, I think Barna said, since COVID have stopped going to church altogether. They have stopped, which is a large portion of people. There's a lot of shifting that's happened through this season, and it feels like I loved what you said yesterday when people are out there trying to dismantle or deconstruct the church. Right. They're going against the one of the primary sort of directives of Jesus to establish the church. And so what is it you're seeing in the church at large? You're traveling a bit, you're seeing different, do you feel like there's this drawing in as well as this sifting out? I mean, what do you kind of see happening?
Well, there's been lots of bad press for the church in the last few years. There's been a lot of mistakes that leaders have made, and that's what gets publicity. Right. So it's almost like there is an expectation that the church is like any other organization. It's corrupt and all those things. So there's been people drawing back and almost like creating their own religion. Yes. Creating shaping faith according to what they want to do. Yeah. And it's an age-old trap that people fall into. Right. But I love what David said. He said, I was glad when they said to me, let's go up to the house of the Lord. Yeah. And when I fell in love with Jesus, he said to me, well, you need to love my bride. Mm. If you love me, you need to love my bride. Yeah, so good. And so I fell in love with the church. And so I'm a church guy. Yeah. And there's problems, there's mistakes that have been made, there's sin that's happened that should be repented of, all those things. And the church can be a very toxic place for people. Right. But that wasn't Jesus' intent for the church. Right. So I want to be one that carries the banner for church. And I try to come out of what does the Bible say about the church, and I try to live by the scriptures in my life. But I'm not going to be one of those that just sits around banging on all the problems that are wrong. I'm going to find some solutions. Right. Okay, the church got that wrong. They need to get it right. Yeah. What can we do here? So I go to the Lord. I'll say, Lord, what do we do about this situation? Yeah. What do we do? So, and I get to advise different politicians at times, and sometimes my advice is really deep, like, stop that. Yeah. Knock it off. Maybe you should ask for forgiveness for that. Right. Just basic, fundamental tenets of the faith. Yeah. So I think what's happening about the mountain of the Lord is I believe that the Lord is making himself and the church more attractive. Yeah. There's an attracting. I'm seeing it a lot in the younger generations. Yeah. They want to know about the Lord. They want to know about the real stuff. Yeah. And so I think although on the one side there's the whole deconstruction, anything you say about church is negative because that's what's cool to say. Right. But at the same time, there's this attractional pull
Right.
That I believe the Lord is gathering His people.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about living in this time.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm excited about what God's doing across the earth. I know there's all kinds of things to be concerned about, but I take my concerns, I give them to the Lord. Yeah. And I don't get any more complicated than that. And I say, Lord, what's my part here?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah. I think that's so good, because I think when you look at, and you're right, media is not covering the pastor of a church who's just out there faithfully shepherding, loving, serving his community, being faithful to his spouse, his wife, his children. They have nothing they're not interested in that story. They're interested in a few. It's interesting. I years ago went to a David Barton event where they had senators come in and talk to pastors. It was actually 2016, pre the election, this big shifting moment in America, as far as everybody thought Hillary was going to just win the day. And that was the tenor of the room. There was probably 150 pastors there. Right. But he made a very profound statement. He said, the media, the people you hear from in Congress and in Senate, he said, it's about 12 to 15 you hear from all the time that constantly the media goes to. And he said, I just want you to know there's a lot of men and women, godly men and women, and some of them, he said, you're going to hear from these next couple of days, who are serving their country, with integrity. They have high morals, high standards. And, I think the challenge is when all we ever do is listen to this white noise that's out there of just, and again, you said it, there's some things that are wrong. There's some things that need to be repented of. There's some behaviors that are unattractive for, as it relates to Jesus, that not things he would be involved in. But that's all you hear. You don't hear the other side of this, where there are pastors out there loving Jesus, loving people, and I think that's so important to come back to that. Okay, Lord, taking my concerns to you. And then where do I land in this? What is my assignment out of this? Is it to pray? Is it to, whatever that might be? You talked about things that churches probably struggle with and things they're doing well. What are some of the things you see the church, or maybe are imperative for the church to do well in this next season that we're leading into?
Well, I think there's a strong drawing to community.
Yeah.
People are losing friendships. They're isolating. That's been going on for a number of years now.
Right.
And they're starting to have all the anxieties and all the tensions that go with being isolated. So there's this draw ever since the old TV show Friends, that really struck a chord with people.
Yep.
They started redefining family. They just needed to be in community. If you've ever gone to a football game and you watch them tailgate, they won't even go into games. They just love to be there and be together. So I think the church that can help people find connection, find community, not as perfect people, but as people on this journey together, trying to figure it out with the Lord. I think that's what folks are looking for. Right. And I know that there's community on the internet. There are folks that are watching on various channels to see what's going on in the church. But I don't think it's the same watching from a distance as it is being in the same place with a group of people, worshiping together, letting the different gifts impacting them, being in that place and in that space. And so I feel the thing I hear over and over and over, even from pastors, is I don't have a friend.
Yeah,
I just feel alone.
So true.
And so I think the oldest trick in the book for the enemy is to divide, isolate, conquer.
Yeah.
And so I think the church that lets the pastors that let the church breathe.
Yeah.
Where they learn to linger and not just cut it off and say, get out of here, we got another group coming in. And so I think, and I saw that in your church, folks didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
They just wanted to hang out and be together. And so I think that's very, very healthy.
Yeah.
And I think leadership's got to become more collaborative.
Yes.
It can't be one sage on the stage that has it all.
Yeah.
It's a we and not a me thing.
I agree.
And so I think that's starting to happen some. Yeah. And I have a lot of hope. I'm like in your church. It wasn't just this weekend that you saw people say, that every weekend folks are giving their lives to Jesus, and they're literally running to him.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing what's
Yeah.
going on. So something's going right in your church.
Yeah, we get a lot of help from the Lord. That's what I tell people. What are you doing? I'm like, we just pray a lot. He helps us a lot. But, it's interesting when you talk about that online versus in person. And I'm a big proponent of, it probably cuts against the grain with, a lot of pastors out there counting people online. And I'm like, we look at it as our front door. It's like our porch. It's
Right.
our front door. We want it to be welcoming. We want it to be, a place where you can peek in and see. But ultimately, we want to get you into those, familial family spaces of the kitchen and the living room, and we're going to sit down and be in a relationship. And so I tell people all the time, it's a resource, not a replacement.
Right.
It's always better in the room.
Right.
And I think probably one of the best pictures I heard a guy give was, he said, it's like going to a wedding. There were times during COVID when people were getting married and, they were doing it via FaceTime or what, during these, Zoom calls and things. And it's just not the same, because why do you go to a wedding of someone? Your presence there
Yep.
means something.
Right.
You want to dance the dance with the bride or the groom, or you want to be there in the moment. You want to bring the gift. You want to, it's I just thought it's so true. We don't, you don't mail it in at a wedding of someone that you genuinely in relationship,
Well, I love music.
Yeah.
And so I've been privileged to know some wonderful musicians over the year, and I love listening to albums, listening. But there's something about a live
That is true.
show. There's something
That is
about
true.
when you can see that chance they might make a mistake or they might really get it right. And so you're sitting there and you're in the experience with them. And that, to me, that's a little bit like the church.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch the church. I want to be in
Yeah.
it. I want to see, I want to touch, I want to smell, I want to
Absolutely.
hear what's going on.
Yeah.
And you can't do that from a distance. You can't do it. Now my mom is about to be 87 and she doesn't get out of her house much, and so she watches a lot of Christian television, and that does it for her.
Right.
But she also gets very lonely.
Yeah.
So we have a number of people that just keep dropping by to see her. She's a prayer warrior, and it builds her up like no other thing when she gets to see people.
For sure. It's funny you mentioned the concert aspect of this thing, because I have fallen in love with bands or artists after I went to their concert. That before I was like, that's okay. But you go see them live, and it's just like there's a whole depth to this thing of appreciation, whether it's just the showmanship or the musicianship or just the experience of it all, especially if it's a Christian or a worship environment. I come away with a different appreciation for the recording then, because I'm going back to that live interactive connection. I think that's some of the church.
What makes bands popular is not just that they're good technically, but you need to make a heart connection.
Yeah.
They sing that song that you need in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a sound that just resonates with you. And so I think if you're thinking about becoming a part of a church and you haven't been for a while, find that place that resonates with you. You walk in the front door and you just feel. We have people all the time come into our church and they'll say, I just walked in the room and I felt something. What was that? And I'll say, well, it could have been the presence of the Lord. And so I feel there's something experiential about church that is valid.
I would agree.
A lot of people will say it's not the experience, and they major on understanding, and I appreciate all that.
Sure.
But it's the whole package.
Yeah.
I don't just know about Jesus, I know Jesus.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't just know about my friends, I need to know my friends.
Yeah.
My friends need to know me. So I've seen how bad deconstruction has been in certain churches, and it's telling.
Yeah.
And it's made it popular to say, well, I'm spiritual, but I don't go to church.
Right.
And well, if you're a Christian,
right. Ultimately. Yeah. I met a couple in our church just recently, completely unsaved. I'll shorten this thing way down. They told me it was an amazing story. Self-proclaimed atheist, away from God. The wife raised in some kind of religion. They were been together for years. Long story short, they're watching videos on New Age, crystals and all this, and they come to a video criticizing some aspect of the Bible. Right. I think it was Noah's Ark, and they were like, is that in the Bible? And so they go to the Bible and they start reading, they find it, and they're like, wow. So this, all of a sudden now the Holy Spirit's just, all the while he's been working, but draws them in. And it was interesting. They started watching a Del Tackett video, something like the Truth Project or something. The husband sitting there, the self-proclaimed atheist who became spiritualist through all this, now is reading his Bible and all of this. And he watches this video and he said, I was just broken sitting on my couch, weeping. The gospel, the love of Jesus was so clear to me. And he's like, I gave my heart to Jesus on the couch. What was interesting, though, they continued just, I think, for like 3 years, just reading their Bible. That's all they were doing, because they didn't know any about it. They didn't have any real. They'd had a little. The wife had a little bit of church, but it wasn't this resonating, connecting with their heart experience necessarily. And I think he was probably in a denomination that, again, he felt like it was, didn't really feed him. And at some point, they said, they looked at each other like, we should probably get into a church. And it was like the natural progression. That's what I look at when I say the Lord ultimately, like if you're really leaning into the Lord, at some point, I think he's going to draw you into the body, because of the significance of what he does through relationship and through the discipleship that happens, the gift that you are, the gift that you bring, the gifts you receive. And I thought that was such a great story of just the progression of God as he's just continually working people into that, the family.
There are folks that think that the church is all about rules and rituals, and they've just had their fill of more information, more rules, more expectations. But for me, the church is the object of Jesus' affection. Yeah. And it's the church that he wants to reveal himself to the world through. Yeah. So to me, you get to be a part of the organization, the organism in the earth, that you can find Jesus consistently. Yeah. You'll find all the mistakes because there's people there.
For sure.
But there's something about the church that is precious.
Yes.
And it's holy, if I can even use that term.
Yeah.
And so I feel God's giving an opportunity. I think there's a call going out in the spirit, in the atmosphere, saying, I want you to come to me. I want you to come hang out with my bride and be a part of her. And it's compelling. We're seeing people show up that haven't been to church in 10 years. Yeah. They just thought, I just felt I needed to give it one more shot. I walked in the front door and I felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. Yeah. So I think, I know the world's in a horrible shape right now, but I think as the church, we are positioned perhaps our finest hour. Yeah. If we'll just be who we are. Yep. Love people, love one another, and lift up the Lord, then I think that's going to probably be a louder volume going out into the world than we've ever had before. Yeah. So I'm excited about the time that we're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we kind of close this conversation up a little bit, the person yesterday who stood, and there was a great amount, I think, that responded. 368 people saved. 368.
368. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Lord.
Amen. That's a little shocking. I mean, in a good way. Like, wow, that's 368 across all campuses. Wow. So obviously, man, the Lord was moving in a powerful way. And I love so much just your genuine, kind, loving approach to people. No emotionalism. No, and that's so many times how we are. We're just like, hey, do you want to, and people, just the Holy Spirit drawing people. So that's an incredible 368. So that's an amazing. Thank you, Chris. So to the person who stood yesterday and prayed that prayer of consecration, that Lord, I'm going to be all in. I want to be all in the mountain of the Lord. What would be your simple advice to them? I mean, we talked a little bit, but if you could just sit down across the table from them and they go, hey, Pastor Wayne, I was there. I prayed that prayer. I meant it with all my heart. And I got up on Monday. What do I do from here?
I would say love what God loves.
Yeah.
He loves people. He loves the church. He's given us a book. You need to read his book.
Yeah.
He'll speak to you through his book, just like he'll speak to you through people, through different gifts in the Spirit. But get involved with the things that he's already given us.
Yeah.
And it sounds old, but go to church.
Yeah, great.
Go
Yeah.
find a place that you can
The old
fellowship with
path
people,
works. Yeah.
and find some friends that you can do life with.
Yeah.
And feel free to ask questions,
Yeah.
but find some friends that you can do life with,
Yeah.
and you'll do a whole lot better. For me, being all in is being a disciple.
Yeah.
I made more than a decision when I got saved. I became a disciple.
So good.
Because there's an old James Brown song in the 70s. It said 99 and a half just won't do.
Yeah.
You got to have 100. And
Yeah.
so for me, I want to be all in. 99 and a half won't do. I think you'll be miserable
Right.
if you're, well, I'll give God Sunday morning, but
Yeah.
the rest of the time is mine.
Right.
So I encourage you to be all in.
Yeah.
Jump in. There's folks that will help you.
Yeah.
And look around and make the connections you need to make and see what God will do, because
Yeah.
he promises hope and a future for you.
Yeah. So
That's
good.
straight from God.
So good.
And so there is a place for your destiny to unfold with a group of people that you can do life with,
Yeah.
and you'll never have to be alone again.
Yeah. Get in his book, get in his word.
Yep.
Get in relationship, obviously spending that time. It's interesting, next week we actually launch our groups semester, so there's a perfect opportunity to find a place to just start building those relationships and start walking out this new consecration together and discovery. And I love that. It's just really been connected to that word lately, just discovering Jesus in a whole new way and a fresh way. And so thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
And taking some time with us this morning. And I know this is going to be a blessing to folks. And so I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us in the green room. And we look forward to seeing you more next week.